Right where you guys can see here, origins means where it starts, like the beginning. And then we've got World War II. So World War II was definitely not called World War II at the very start of the war. It was frequently referred to as the war to end all wars, just like we didn't call World War One the World War One when it happened, because we couldn't foresee that there would be another, even though it should be pretty obvious. But I digress. So World War One was originally called the Great War, and now we've got the war to end all wars. And then the tagline, it all starts with Hitler. So I've just got Adolf Hitler, since he's your vocabulary word here. All right. So let's get started. We've got the review slide going over previous content that we should remember, but even if we weren't distance learning, I would cover this stuff anyway, because I know that some of the nitty-gritty details are always the easiest to be forgotten. So what we've got here is the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. That is one of the most important things that you will ever hear about. It will be frequently referenced in every single history class that you take from now until the end of time. We know that it ends World War I, and we know that it's extremely unfair towards Germany. And then underneath, I've got these 4 little bullet points to go over the main points of the treaty. So anything that deals with the military, we know that there's a limit. There's a limit that's placed on the army so that they can only have 100,000 men in their military at one time. They're also not allowed to have any submarines, because they used unrestricted submarine warfare several times, killed a lot of civilians, so that's a no-go. They were not allowed to have an air force because they dropped a lot of bombs and killed a lot of people that way. And they also have a decreased navy. I believe they're allowed to keep 5 ships. Now, all of that is a significantly reduced military from what Germany had prior to World War I. So it's insulting. Something else that they had to give up was a lot of territory on a lot of land. And you can see over here, they had to give up all their foreign colonies, which is going to give us the mandate system through the League of Nations, where France and England are going to be in charge of some of these countries, quote unquote, temporarily. But we find that they hold on to them a lot longer than they should be. Also, Germany is told that they're not allowed to have a union with Austria. They're forbidden from creating a larger empire. We remember that Germany is forced to pay $30 billion in reparations, not both, but to the United States, to England, and to France as well, where they destroyed a lot of land and production facilities. Excuse me. And last but not least is the war guilt clause. And we know, whoopsie-daisy, that the war guilt clause down here, let's see here, my home, nope, draw. Okay, the war guilt clause, it's where Germany is going to be 100% responsible for starting World War I, even though they are not the ones who killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand, even though they are not the ones, there we go, who declare war on Germany first. They are the ones that have to accept full blame, and it's because they're the ones that fought the longest, right? And then you come down here, and we have the League of Nations. With the League of Nations, it's incredibly important that you kind of always keep this in the back of your mind, because the book alludes to or references it, but does not actually talk about them as blatantly as they should. So this is something that we need to make sure we kind of remember. Now, we remember that it's weak. It has no authority. It has no authority to tell anyone no. It has no military authority. It was a suggestion originally by Woodrow Wilson, the American president, in his 14 points, but all of that was just too hippy-dippy and peaceful. So Europe wasn't a huge fan. And then when they finally got on board, it was created after World War I, but the United States doesn't join. And they're not going to join because of a concept called isolationism. The United States became an isolationist nation again. And so they were trying to stay out of European wars and European conflicts. They didn't want to have to be forced to go to war for something that wasn't close to them, that had nothing to do with them, anything like that. So then over here, we've got the rise of authoritarian dictators or totalitarians. And so this is stuff that we've either talked about or we're going to kind of talk about more in depth in 10.3 and 12.1. You've got Benito Mussolini is an Italian dictator. He's fascist, right? You have Adolf Hitler, who we're going to talk about at length today. You have Hideki Tojo in Japan, who's also going to start being mentioned in 12.1. And then you have Francisco Franco, who was referred to in 10.2. With Stalin and Mussolini. So all of these dictators are in power at the same time, and they kind of feed off of each other. And then last but not least, you have the causes of World War I up here, Amen or Maine or Mania, just to remind you that we still have alliances. There are countries that just are naturally aligning themselves or becoming political friends with others. Imperialism is always a problem. People want to take land that doesn't belong to them. Militarism, where you've got each nation, if they think that they will, no one will want to attack them if they have a bigger, badder military. And then nationalism, my nation is better than yours, always causes a lot of problems. So this is what's going on inside Europe at the time that Adolf Hitler is going to be coming to power. So let's take a look at Adolf Hitler. Okay, and so we've got Adolf Hitler, a portrait of him right here. I do want to remind you that you're going to see a lot of propaganda, but you've got this stately painting that's supposed to encourage the person who is viewing this to think that Adolf Hitler is distinguished, that he is very accomplished, and he must be a very important person. So here you've got Adolf Hitler and his infamous, right, famous for a bad reason, mustache. And then I want to point out a couple of things to you. Right here in the bottom left, you've got this iron cross. This is going to be a medal for bravery. And then down here in the bottom right is going to be the Nazi swastika. So we're going to talk about that, okay, on our next slide, because you want to make sure that everyone knows visual cues and symbols to make sure that we're on the same page. So here you have a Nazi swastika, and I am really sad that I have to say this every single year. Please do not ever, 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 ever draw one. You can draw it in like this history notebook this one time. But if you start putting swastikas on things, it's an immediate warning. It's an incredibly infamous symbol. When there have been students who start drawing swastikas on tables or in books, it's an immediate warning sign for teachers to contact parents. And now with a lot of other fears in the world, it definitely gets you a lot of attention that you definitely don't want. But that's the Nazi swastika, very infamous symbol. And so the next slide is swastikas throughout history. So I do want to let you guys know that swastikas are not unique. It's not new. I know that one of the things that I hear every year from students is, isn't it a Tibetan peace symbol that's been flipped or inverted? And it's like, yes, absolutely. But the Tibetan culture isn't the only culture that has something similar to a swastika. But that's the whole point, is Hitler took something familiar and ruined it. So if you look, all of these cultures independently throughout history have their own version of a swastika. So you have the Hopi. It's a tribe, a Native American tribe here in the United States. You've got the Hindu cultures in India, the Islamic culture, Japan. The Celts are from, you've got England, Ireland, Scotland, Tibet. You've got Laplanders from the Scandinavian nations like Finland, the Aztecs from the region that we now know as Mexico. So all over the world, we've had Nazi swastikas, or not Nazi swastikas, that sounds awful. We've had symbols that are like swastikas, but Hitler ruined it. And he did that quite intentionally, okay? So what we've got here, okay, April 20th in from students. They're like, did you hear that he's alive and well in like Argentina? And it's like, no, he's not. I don't think anyone's made it to be 131 years old alive. So he's definitely not still alive, even if the conspiracy theory of him escaping is correct. He is most certainly absolutely dead. And so Adolf Hitler was born in Austria. It's that country right next door to Germany. He was raised in an extremely abusive household, not to make excuses for him, but just to make connections to both Stalin and Mussolini's household. His father, just like Stalin and Mussolini, very violent alcoholic. Hitler grows up absolutely adoring his mom. Now, luckily for Hitler, his father dies in 1903. His father was in the military, so he receives a pension. And a pension is monthly money sent out to you until you turn 18 years old and become an adult. And so just like kids in the United States, when they have a little money, they feel very fiercely independent. He kind of started goofing off and not really taking his academic responsibilities seriously. So he never graduated from secondary school. Secondary school is another way to say high school. He dropped out. And he was like, you know what, F this all. I'm going to go to art school. You guys all see the memes where it's just art school, you know. If they had just accepted Hitler, like he would have never existed. So he attempts to go to art school, but he's rejected because he doesn't have the prerequisites. And it's about this time that his mom dies from what we think is breast cancer. And so another thing that I want to touch on is that Hitler is absolutely not Jewish. People always ask, why did he hate the Jews so much? And it 100% does not do a self-loathing Jewish individual. For those of us who are Jewish, we know that Judaism is something that's passed through the mother's bloodline. Hitler's mother, not Jewish, therefore no Judaism. On top of it, there are a ton of other ceremonies going through a bar mitzvah, things that actually contribute to a person's Jewishness, which is a culture, not a race. It's not inherited. So Hitler had none of that. So no, Hitler is not Jewish. Let's just stomp that one out right there. And so here I've got some pictures for you just to show more propaganda as Hitler is the valiant leader. And then the fascist Nazi salute, which, I'm sure is very infamous. Please, once again, do not go around trying to show off and do this in public. It is a tremendous warning sign. People will definitely look at you very, very, very weird. Please, please, please do not. And before we go on with more of the things that Adolf Hitler is guilty of doing and being, I wanted to show you some of his paintings. I know that there are a lot of memes online right now where they're like, oh, do you like this painting? Well, you just enjoyed Adolf Hitler. And it's like, well, he really wasn't like a bad artist. So he was rejected for not completing the prereq, right? Like when if you guys choose to go to college, that you've completed in classes, right? So it's not that he was rejected because he wasn't talented. I can't do that. So Hitler was 120% a better artist than I will ever be. So don't give in to that idea that he was a crap artist. Okay. So Adolf Hitler did a lot and is guilty of a lot of things. So World War I is about to break out. Hitler is dismissed, which means he's basically politely been fired from the Austrian army. He thought that he would go into the army since he can't go to art school, which is his love. His father was in the military. Doesn't happen. He's too weak to bear arms. And before you guys start making fun of him, he can't even hold a gun. Remember, early guns or early machine guns in World War I weigh 60 to 120 pounds a piece. So odds are none of us could hold a World War I gun at all. And in fact, they actually had teams up to 2 to 4 men carrying a gun anyway. So the Austrian army doesn't want him. World War I breaks out. Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets shot, not by Germany, right, but by the Black Hand. And so Germany declares war on France because they are following through with their deal, the blank check to Austria-Hungary. And Hitler is going to rush to join the military in Germany. And when I say it's because Germany did not discriminate, it's more or less because they need bodies, right? They need bodies. They don't care how weak you are. And you'll find out in World War II, they really don't care how old you are. They're going to start throwing teenagers out on the front lines. And so throughout World War I, Hitler is actually a decorated hero. He received something called the Iron Crosses. The Iron Cross we showed in an earlier picture, but the Iron Cross is a medal of honor. And so in the United States, we call them like Purple Hearts. And so when he is in World War I, he's got really weak sauce jobs. He basically carries orders and mail from the back where everyone is to the front where people are fighting. He survives a gas attack. He's at a hospital when Germany surrenders. And he's super bitter about Germany's surrender, about like everyone else. Now, after the war, the Germans decide that they're going to utilize this man's passion and dedication to Germany. And he's going to become a spy for not just the German army, but also the German government. And he's going to try and find about subversive activities. So subversive means going against what the government wants. And so his first major assignment is going to be the Nazi Party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. It was an assignment. It wasn't like he sought them out because he agreed with them, but he ended up really supporting their philosophy and then went from being a spy to actually being a true member. So I misremembered. We did not go over what an Iron Cross is. And so the Iron Cross right here is a German Medal of Honor. And then you can see right here to the right of it, I put a symbol for West Coast choppers. Imagery is everything in propaganda and in showing you what is correct and what's not correct, behavior, language, etc. But I like to throw up the motorcycle company because not a lot of people know Jesse James, the owner who used to be married to Sandra Bullock. He has shop down in Long Beach. He's a neo-Nazi. He is a Nazi aficionado. You guys can do a deep dive on Google about him, but there's a reason why he picked that symbol. And it's like to covertly tell people that he's into white supremacy and white nationalism. So, be very, very, very careful. Like when you guys see trucks with those symbols on them, that's also low key telling you that they are part of that group or like that philosophy. So after World War I, you've got Adolf Hitler. So he officially joins the vocabulary word National Socialist German Workers' Party. This is a fascist group. They're going to believe the same type of nationalized building ideas that Mussolini is trying to create in Italy at this exact same time. And so one of the things that they do is they decide to go hang out in a bar, which is a not fancy way for beer hall. And they're going to commit something called the beer hall putsch in 1923. And you can see over here that I've kind of giving you a small German lesson that Putch is German for revolt and beer hall is a bar. So they came up with the idea to have this revolt in a bar. So you know that that's going to go really well. The Nazis then are going to march on Munich, right, which is a city in Germany. The anglicized version for us is Munich. And after they take control of the government there, Hitler plans to march on Berlin, which is its capital, right? So they're going to go from major city to major city, and they're going to have a violent overthrow. They did not succeed. And so there were several leaders of this beer hall putsch, and they were all arrested and they were all imprisoned. They were all arrested, and only Hitler was the only one who was not killed for treason. And I think that's really important to note. all other participants that led this were put to death for treason except for Hitler. And it's not by some twist of fate. It's because he played the, oh, I was a spy card. I was a spy. I was trying to help out the government the whole time. And so because of his friendships as well with government, he only serves 1 year in prison, whereas once again, everyone else is put to death. So while he's in prison, he writes vocabulary word Mein Kampf. It is translated to My Struggle. It is a book that is very anti-Semitic, meaning it's very prejudiced against the Jews. It's anti-communist. It's anti-everything, honestly. It's just horrible, horrible rants. And so when you look at Mein Kampf, you can either get this copy with a picture of the Führer on it, right? Your leader, or you can get a very rare copy that's just got the book title on it, right? This book would become required reading in Nazi Germany, and all newlyweds would be given this as a gift. It was required to have this in your house in Nazi Germany once Hitler finally comes into power. And then if you're curious, you can find it online, but people are going to be paying attention to that traffic. But you can also check this out at the public library if you want to read his rants, because even though I'm not a fan of suggesting you should read it, you should always know what other people are saying, even if you don't believe in it or agree in it, because you need to be educated. So just beware. If you do ever check this book out, you will get weird looks, and there are records kept at public libraries. So just beware. But yeah, so Mein Kampf is a deeply anti-Semitic book that Hitler authors while he's bitter and in prison. So when he gets out of prison, he comes out to the Nazi Party not being very popular with Germany and Germans because things are terrible. The 1920s are a really great time. Even in Germany, there's wealth. People are working. It's not a big problem. And Hitler kept saying, no, 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 things are going to be bad again. Things are going to be bad. And everyone's like, that Hitler is just crazy. Let's just ignore him. So he kept saying that economic times are going to get worse. So when they do get worse, in October of 1929, the United States stock market crashes. This was one of your vocabulary words in the last few weeks. The Great Depression starts in the United States, and it becomes a world depression. People start looking at Hitler and they're like, oh man, you're omnipotent. Omnipotent means all-knowing. It's usually a word that's used for God. God, if you believe in him or her or its existence, is usually seen as all-knowing. And so Hitler was viewed as omnipotent because he saw this coming. And so people started to listen to him and the Nazi Party a little bit more. And I do want to just highlight this, is that the Nazi Party is going to become more popular and is actually voted into the Reichstag. Now, the Reichstag is one of your vocabulary words. It's just German parliament, right? A German lawmaking body. But people voted him into power. He didn't steal power. He didn't kill people. He didn't create a big march on Rome and take power, from the leader. He was voted in. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, while he's in power, he makes a couple of good decisions to kind of solidify the Nazis in power. He burns down the German Reichstag in 1933, and they're going to blame the enemies of the fascists, and those would be the communists. So just hint, hint, fascists hate communists. They are like mortal enemies. Fascists believe you suppress your individualism and you support the supremacy of the state, and communists are like, the state is nothing, it's the people, right? And so the Nazis really burn this down. They blame the communists. It's a ploy to get more support, and they're doing this while there's a Great Depression. So they're like, those communists don't even look at Germany as their own country, look at how they're destroying us even further, things like that. So now Hitler is made chancellor. This is a word that is not defined in your textbook, which is very frustrating for me. Chancellor is just a different title for prime minister, and he is going to be the leader of the Reichstag, the chancellor of the Reichstag, which is German parliament. Okay. Now he's voted into power into the Reichstag as like a lawmaker, but he's going to be made chancellor by the president at the time, Paul von Hindenburg. And this is a guy you don't need to know or remember. I'm not testing you on him. But Paul von Hindenburg has been mentioned in your textbook because he was a World War I general. He was actually really famous, really important man in history. And he was going to and did rise to become the president of Germany. And he's like, look, it's going to be easier to have this really crazy, dangerous man as like my vice president or my chancellor if I'm right here with him. But what they don't expect is that Paul von Hindenburg then dies. And so then Hitler is like, we don't need no stinking presidents. I'm going to be the sole leader. And he changes the form of government in Germany for forever. So one of the first things that he does after Hindenburg dies is he's going to withdraw from the League of Nations, that really weak body that's trying to keep peace in Europe. Hitler's like, yeah, I don't need any of that nonsense. So he quits it. And then the next thing that Hitler and his Nazi party do is they're going to pass the Enabling Bill or the Enabling Act of 1933. And this gives him full legal dictatorial powers over Germany. So he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants, because he is now he's the dictator. This is actually where we're going to see that vocabulary word, mein Führer, okay, the leader, is going to come in, and they're going to assume that everything he does is for the benefit of Germany and to make Germany strong again. And then goes over what your textbook goes over is that Hitler is then going to do one of the first things in totalitarianism. He's going to outlaw all other political parties. So you have to be a Nazi. No matter if you agree or disagree, you have to become a Nazi from 1933 on. And so here I've just got pictures of the Enabling Act, that vocabulary word, and then a picture of the Reichstag with the Nazi swastika in back hanging, showing which party is in charge and what party you have to belong to. Now I'm going to sidestep because Hitler is going to talk a lot about this group called Aryans. And so over here, I've got it phonetically spelled out E-N-S, Aryan. And so an Aryan, according to Hitler, and what is kind of talked about in your textbook, is Hitler calls this a superior racial category. And it's supposed to be everyone is descended from the Greeks and the Romans, which is kind of like a throwback to the Roman Empire, which is exactly what Mussolini is doing in Italy at the same time, saying we are descendants of these great, great people, and we can be great again. And he said that only the Germans and the Scandinavians, and I just want to remind you that Scandinavians are from Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. They've got blonde hair, blue eyes. That's the stereotypical look. It's not 100% true for all Germans and Scandinavians. And basically, Hitler is lying. He's talking about the Nordic group of people, and he's calling them Aryan. So he's using the word wrong. Now, if you actually are interested in what an Aryan actually is and who they are, factually and truly, it's Arabic people, specifically Persians, who invaded India thousands of years ago and then reproduced with the Indian people. They're called Indo-European, and they've got fair skin, light eyes, dark hair. And if you guys are really curious, like I put this little picture up of this really famous National Geographic girl. All you really have to type in is Nat Geo, blue eyes girl, and it'll pop up. But there are Aryan people around today in India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, very, very common. So not what Hitler was going for. Now, also kind of discussed in your textbook in the middle of everything that Hitler is doing is a really terrible sounding German word. It's Schutzstaffeln. And I know I didn't pronounce that right. And thank God they just shortened it to the SS. It's a military guard Squadron. And they are going to force everyone to believe in Nazi ideology. And if they don't, then they're going to terrorize you. And so this is very similar, not only in Russia to the Cheka and the Commissars, those teachers of communist principles, but now we also have to remember it's similar to the OVRA and to the black shirts. And these are going to be the aspects of totalitarianism, methods of enforcement, right? So I know you guys were like, why do we have to memorize these 7 aspects? And it's like, so you can see the pattern in all countries that this just keeps happening. Okay. Now, your textbook also kind of takes a sidestep and goes over women in Nazi Germany. And it's just to remind you that women need to stay at home and raise future generations. They are the bringers of the Aryan race. So it's very important that they only marry a good German Aryan boy. And so I know we talked about this a little bit with fascist Italy, where women would get medals if they had a certain amount of children, and the same thing is going to be true in Germany. So if you guys are interested, you can go on a deep dive on the Cross of Honor for the German mother. You can get a bronze medal if you have 4 to 5 children, a silver medal for having 6 to 7 children, and a gold medal for having more than 8 children, which just seems insane. So while Hitler is consolidating power in Nazi Germany, married women are discouraged from having jobs. So they're no longer allowed to be university professors, doctors, lawyers. They're forced to go home and, be mothers. They didn't want women working in heavy industry or in factories because they thought that might be bad for future babies. And then unmarried women make really good stereotypical like social workers and nurses and caregivers, right? And so there were a lot of propaganda campaigns to remind women that they mattered in this political sphere. So if men aren't working, children are the future. Save the German family, vote for Adolf Hitler. So Hitler will get us out of this depression. Hitler will give your man a job. Vote for Hitler. Okay. So one of the things that Hitler is going to do right after he comes into power, one of your vocabulary words are the Nuremberg Laws. And these laws very specifically revoke the rights of Jewish individuals in Germany. And so this says that Jews are no longer citizens of Germany anymore. Okay. They also are going to categorize Jews as a race, not as a culture. And so if you have a Jewish parent or grandparent, it means that you're Jewish. And then over time, it becomes a lot more complicated. And the United States did something similar for people of African-American descent. And so it got to the point where if you were like 1/16 African-American, you were still considered Black. And therefore you couldn't sit in the white train car or you couldn't drink from a white water fountain. It was pretty awful. And so Germany is going to follow suit. These laws also prevent marriages between Jews and non-Jews. And if you are already married, it dissolves your marriage, saying that it's not legal, it was never okay in the first place, and you're no longer married. One of the most heinous parts of the Nuremberg Laws, which is actually saying something because they're all heinous, is that Jews cannot employ non-Jewish women under the age of 45. And so in theory, most women will go through something called menopause at about age 45. And after women go through menopause, they can no longer have children. And so the implication here is that Jewish men are going to have sex with non-Jewish women, and they're going to ruin the bloodline for these women and create these mixed children that would further ruin Germany. It is horrific. And because Jews are no longer German citizens, they can't display the German flag, but they can display Jewish colors just fine. And then just to kind of go over why they're called the Nuremberg Laws, just like most treaties, Nuremberg is a city in Germany, and the Nazis are going to hold all of their rallies here. This is where they're going to have everything of political importance is going to come out of here. And at the end of the war, it's very strategic that the Allies, England, the United States, kind of France, we're going to have war trials here held against these criminals in Nuremberg, and we call them the Nuremberg Trials. And we're trying to intentionally destroy that Nazi reputation. Now, when we're going back to the Nuremberg Laws, kids were taught in school, just like you guys use the Punnett squares from your biology class to look at dominant and recessive traits. Kids are learning, like, if you're 25% Jewish, 50% Jewish, 75% Jewish, or 100% Jewish. And I do want to reiterate, being Jewish is not a race. It is a culture. Being Israeli is an ethnicity, or a nationality, but it is not a race. And then I really like this little visual of, you see children in their biology class, I assume, learning genetics of Jewishness and who's good and who's bad. And then down here in the bottom right, you've got this cartoon of presumably a pure German and then a pure Jewish person. And it's saying that it is verboten. Verboten is German for forbidden. It's not allowed for someone of Jewish descent to marry someone of German descent. And it doesn't even matter if you're just partially Jewish. You can no longer you can't ruin the bloodline anymore. You got to stop. It is all verboten. Okay. And so this is, there's a book that you guys can find in the resources of the class, and it's called The Poisonous Mushroom. And in The Poisonous Mushroom, it's a little kid's book for like elementary age school children. And it's teaching them how to identify a Jewish person and why you should hate the Jewish person. It is absolutely horrific propaganda. And so you've got the little boy pointing out what a Jewish nose looks like next to a stereotypical Jewish face. Now, the Star of David. I mean, it's all terrible. And I want to highlight, it is a super racist and very depressing book. But I do have that in our class resources if you want to see that. Now, some of the other changes that Hitler is going to be making at this time. So 1935, he's starting to become a dynamic leader, and he is creating an enemy to unify all Germans against. And then the next thing he does is he starts violating that Treaty of Versailles, which is what at the very beginning of this lecture, I was like, hey, let's go over this. So he's going to rebuild his army, which means he is ignoring 100% the limits put on them by the Treaty of Versailles. So he's going to have a bigger army, he's going to have a bigger navy, and he's going to create an air force. And air force is your vocabulary word, but it's in German, and it's Luftwaffe. Luftwaffe. And so Luft is the German word for air. But yeah, so Luftwaffe. And he's going to remilitarize or put the military inside this area of Germany called the Rhineland. And it's on the border with France. And you guys can see I kind of drew it out right here. Germany wasn't supposed to be allowed to have their military there because of what happened during World War I. And so Hitler is like, I'm going to march my military in there. It's my country. I can put my military wherever I want. And England kind of agrees. England's like, look, it's your territory. We shouldn't be able to tell you what to do with your territory. France obviously has a huge issue. This is where you start having them. They've already started to, but now they're building that wall. It's also, oopsie daisy, your vocabulary word. It's the, oh my goodness gracious. It's the Maginot Line. Let me just, I guess we'll do it this way. The Maginot Line. And it's just a concrete cement wall that goes along the border to protect them. The League of Nations is powerless to do anything. And they just shake their finger and say, shame, shame, you shouldn't be doing that, but we're not going to go to war over it. It's not worth going to war yet. And so your book also kind of sidesteps and talks about the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, and I do just want to kind of go over it just a little bit, especially if you're interested in athletics. Hitler wanted to use the 1936 Olympics in Berlin to prove that the Aryans were the superior race. And the problem with that is in the United States, we have a lot of African American athletes, and they kicked Germany's butt. So Jesse Owens is a very famous American Olympian, and he is one of the famous athletes who won 4 gold medals against the Germans and the Aryans. Hitler was so upset he got up and he left. He wasn't even present for the award ceremony. So if you're curious, go on a deep dive about that too. Now, just for fun, I know Jesse Owens just because he ran in the 1984 Olympics. He carries the torch to light it for Los Angeles, which is where the Olympics were held that year. So now, before the Olympics, Germany took down a lot of their anti-Semitic and racist signs because they're putting on a show for the world, because they want to make sure everyone likes them and they're all loved, and no one sees how bad it's gotten and comes in and actually does something. Now, at the same time that Hitler is remilitarizing the Rhineland, and he is trying to make the world believe that the Nazi Aryan race is superior, he's going to employ another aspect of totalitarianism, right? He's going to control society by telling everyone they have to join the Hitler Youth Group and then the League of German Girls. So I want you to just consider this as like the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, but mandatory. And so originally it's for boys to train them to be the Schutzstaffeln, that SS guard that goes around forcing everyone to conform to Nazi ideology. It targets kids aged 10 to 17, and then it becomes mandatory for everyone to join. And because it's boys, the focus is sports, outdoors activities, becoming strong, athletic, powerful, and Nazi ideology. And then for girls, it's collective athletics. So like, let's be a team and work together, and then prepare you for motherhood. But basically, at the end of the day, it's all physical fitness to show that Germans are genetically superior. And so here you've got a picture of girls playing some, I don't even know what team sport is happening here, but it's girls. And then over here, you've got a young boy, and the propaganda is like, he's an officer of tomorrow. Don't you want your wonderful young man to grow up to be like that? So, and at the same time, this is also mentioned in your textbook. Hitler is going to try and control society multiple other ways. You've got the Kraft Durch Freud, which is going to be the Strength Through Joy program. It's just activities for the working class. If you guys go into AP World History, or you guys are just into history, you guys will remember in ancient Rome, bread and circuses. The ancient Roman emperors made sure that no matter how bad things got, you make sure your people are fed and you give them entertainment, because then they can stomach everything else. And then for all of the film buffs in the class, it very minorly touches on the propaganda films under Joseph Goebbels. And one of the most famous or infamous is going to be Lenny Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. Look into it. It 100% portrays Nazi Germany and Hitler as, like the savior of the world, the greatest leader of all time, blah, 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 blah. But after World War II, Lenny Riefenstahl's film career was over. She didn't work again. People were really upset that she made Hitler she glorified him and the Nazis. And then some other films that the book mentions, or that I dug out, were Jude Seuss, which is Seuss the Jew, and Der ewige Juden, which is the eternal Jew. And these are all clearly horrible propaganda films to show you that the Jews can't be trusted and that Jews are terrible people, which is not true. It's just, if you're interested in film, then, you can look that up. So then you've got other things that he's going to start to do, which is in 1938. He's going to, and this is your vocabulary word, going to have the Anschluss Anschluss with Austria. This is union. That's what the word means. And so this is the quote unquote voluntary union of Austria with Germany, where Austria quote unquote wants to become unified with Germany, but they don't. And so this is Hitler's first movement to gain an empire. And over here, it's one of your vocabulary words that's bolded, so you have to look it up. I'm really disappointed that your textbook doesn't mention the Third Reich at all. And the Third Reich is the Third German Empire. And Hitler is using this to say that we used to be great. The first great empire was the Roman Empire when the Romans ruled all of Europe. The second one is the Holy Roman Empire. It comes in like the 700s. You guys don't need to know about that. And then the third one is going to be Hitler. Hitler is going to create this beautiful empire that's going to rule for 1,000 years. And so when Austria unifies with Germany, it's an example of appeasement. Okay. And appeasement is another one of your vocabulary words where it's giving in to the demands of an aggressor because you don't want the fight. And so the League of Nations is like, look, Austria is joining voluntarily. This is not worth going to war over, even though this also explicitly goes against what the Treaty of Versailles says. So we'll just shake our finger and just let him do it. So because Hitler's allowed to get away with that in March of 1938, 6 months later in September, Germany is going to take an area of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland. And so this is going to happen at the Munich Conference. The Munich Conference is Munich, right, is a city in Germany. So the conference takes place in Germany. France, England, Italy, okay, show up in Germany to talk about giving him a piece of land that belongs to Czechoslovakia. And I want to highlight that Czechoslovakia was not invited to this meeting. And Hitler promised, this is the last time I put my military where I want it to protect my country. We've absorbed Austria into this Third Reich. We're taking on Sudetenland. I don't need any more land. I promise you, Europe and League of Nations, this is it. This is all I'm going to do. And they're like, okay, Hitler, we'll give in. This is what you say. We choose to believe you. And Hitler wanted the Sudetenland because he said that this area in Western Czechoslovakia, there are a lot of Germans and German-speaking individuals, and they should be allowed to join their country. And so Neville Chamberlain, who is the Prime Minister of England at this time, and also one of your vocabulary words, he said that he secured peace in our time. He gets off an airplane, he gives a peace conference, everyone cheers, he's great. At the same exact time, Winston Churchill calls BS. He's like, and there's a quote at the very start of your textbook where he's like, this is terrible. Like, we're being lied to. And Winston Churchill is another one of your future vocabulary words. And the reason why he is he's going to be the future Prime Minister of England for the majority of World War II. And so the Munich Conference was a complete disaster. And here we have an image of the German Third Reich, right? This is the expansion of the German Empire, the Third Reich. And so over here you can see the original German territory is in red. Austria is this weird pink. And then the Sudetenland is all land that already touches either Austria or Germany because they speak Germany. So this is how Hitler gets away with this, saying like, oh, it's just, we're just taking back the people that want to be here, right? And so I do want to just remind you that the Sudetenland is a part of Czechoslovakia, the loogie of Europe, right? And then down here I've got a picture. Even though that the Anschluss was voluntary, a lot of people didn't support it, but this propaganda showed people supporting the Nazis, and that it was something that they all wanted, even though majority of the country did not. The prime minister just did it to not make a fuss, not make a fight. And so right after Hitler has created this larger Third Reich, he's going to get a lot more bold, especially within his own country. And so a few months later, something called Kristallnacht. Okay, Kristall in German means glass, and Nacht is night. And so Kristallnacht is the night of broken glass. I think your textbook calls it the night of shattered glass. which is the same thing. At this point, Jewish businesses and synagogues are attacked. Most of them are burned down. In this 2-night period, 91 Jews are killed. Over 30,000 are going to be sent to concentration camps. And so I just want to highlight camps are different from death camps. Concentration camps Hitler started using in the 1930s. I want to say 1933, maybe as early as 1931. And they're labor camps. It's where you were sent if you didn't agree with him. The death camps with the purpose to kill you as soon as you set foot in that camp, those didn't start coming until 1941. Now, it's not to say that people didn't die in concentration camps. They absolutely do. But the idea was to use them for their labor as long as they were alive. And so people were starting to be sent to concentration camps. You've got synagogues are being burned down. And so just in case I haven't defined this for you guys before, synagogue is a Jewish house of worship. It's the Christian equivalent to a church. And this is the Nazis really saying, get out, get out, get out. We don't want you Jews. Please leave. But at the same time, they're also making it very difficult for Jews to leave Germany. Around this exact same time, the Nazi-Soviet Pact is going to be signed. Your textbook calls it the Non-Aggression Pact. It is always referred to as one of those two things. They're interchangeable. And this is where Hitler decides that he is not going to attack Russia. Please remember, this is about a two-front war. Germany made that whoops in 1914 with the Schlieffen Plan, thinking that they could defeat France first and then go to Russia, and Russia mobilized faster. And so this is Hitler saying, like, look, I'm not going to attack you. You don't have to worry about this. But this is so that Hitler doesn't have to worry about fighting on a two-front war at one time. And they also promised to divide up Poland. And the whole goal was to get this, this is one of your vocabulary words. It's Lebensraum, which is living space. And it's living space for good German citizens. And so the goal was to invade Poland, kill a lot of people, force the Polish individuals or the Poles to work on farms to make food for the Germans that would come in and then live and colonize this area. And so the German invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939. This is a very, very important date. This is something you do have to know. It's the official start to World War II. And then just coming back here, excuse me. You've got pics from Kristallnacht. I'm sure you guys can find tons of documentaries where you guys can see the windows have been busted out. You can see that a synagogue here is burning in the top right. And then here you have in the bottom right, once the synagogue is finished burning, what's left over. You've got the New York Times talking about the Nazis smashing, looting, and burning until, of course, Goebbels, the very nice German, tells all of the terrible people to stop. This isn't a government directive. We must, hold off. Now, I don't want you guys to think that anti-Semitism or prejudice and hatred of Jewish individuals stopped after the Holocaust. So here is a modern political cartoon. And just kind of going through the symbols that you see, here you have the Star of David. The Star of David is a Jewish symbol. Okay. It's a symbol of Judaism. And then when you see the word Juden, right, it's the German word for Jew. And then obviously the Nazi swastika. And this is a throwback to Kristallnacht, saying like Night of Broken Glass. This is, we dislike Jews. And then over here is the commentary, that agreement between Turkey and Iran in 2009 is going to result in the destruction of Israel, which is the only Jewish nation on the planet. So you have to make sure that you're paying attention. Right here, we can see that this is very, very Turkey, but you guys don't know, this is Ahmadinejad, a former prime minister. of Iran, but he was very vocally anti-Semitic. And so here they are making a deal for closer ties, which spelled really bad news for Israel at the time. It was, yeah, it's very terrible. So I just want to let you guys know, even though this cartoon is in the year 2009, anti-Semitism is something that is still alive and well today. And so I just want to kind of go over links to white nationalism and in the United States. So some people have 88 tattooed on them. This is something that's discussed a lot in like movies and prison movies. And 8 is the eighth letter of the alphabet is H. And so that will stand for Heil Hitler. Some people will talk about the 14 words with the Proud Boys, and it's a slogan that stands for "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children," which is very clearly it's actually just racist in general, not just anti-Semitic. And then there's a group that's become very prevalent in the last couple of years called the Proud Boys. And it's a group of white men, very specifically men. It's a men's group, and they support conservative values. If you guys remember the protests on the East Coast and like Charleston, the Proud Boys were a part of that. They've been very prevalent in our news in the last couple of years. And then just to kind of remind you guys that anti-Semitism exists in high schools, last year, 2 years ago, El Camino Real, we had several anti-Semitic posters being put around campus, as well as in Newport Mesa. I believe there was like a hazing incident as well. You've got massacres that are still happening in synagogues. And it's not just the United States, it's a worldwide phenomenon. You guys can go into the lecture and through like Google Slides and click on these links to read the articles. There is no shortage, sadly, of anti-Semitic acts. So that's kind of terrible. And then I want to end this lecture on this really amazing poem written by Pastor Martin Niemöller. And this is hanging in my classroom. It's on one of the doors when you guys leave the classroom. And it's first they came for the communists. And I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for socialists. And I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. And I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. And I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me. And then there was no one left to speak out for me. And so what this comes down to is try and stand up for people who need your help. Just because you're not a group being picked on doesn't mean that you shouldn't stand up for other people. And this is something that a lot of people from World War II era Germany, they didn't agree with the Nazi policy. Speak out. They didn't do anything to stop an ever-growing group of people from committing these horrible, heinous acts against a minority of people. And this is something that we can take heart with today, even like with bullying in high school, with the comments that you guys leave on people's videos, on social media. Just because other people are doing it doesn't mean you should join in. And just because you're not being picked on doesn't mean you shouldn't help other people. So I'm really sorry about the length of this lecture. I really hope it helps clarify everything that Hitler does to get power and to demonize Jews, as well as how he violates the Treaty of Versailles. And in the next lecture, I'm going to go over what Japan is doing at the same time. So hope this is helpful. Miss you guys. Bye.